Greetings and salutations, dear strategy fans. Welcome to Tacticon. Welcome to another DevTALK. This time with the one and only Chris, who is working on Heart of the Machine. Chris, who are you? And what is Heart of the Machine?
I'm Chris Park. I am the founder and lead developer over at Arcane Games. We've been making stuff since 2009 with AI War and Less Federation and a bunch of other non-strategy stuff. And then Heart of Machine is our upcoming title that we're working on with Hooded Horse. And this is something that really pulls from a bunch of different past projects in terms of like inspiration. Like people ask us a lot of times, like, hey, we'd love to have a sequel to this, that, or the other. We really haven't done a whole lot of sequels. We've done a sequel to Valley of That Wind, and we did one to AI War. And then other than that, it's been, we've done DLCs, and people are like, oh, but, so this one it's its own thing, but in some ways it's kind of a spiritual successor to like somewhat The Last Federation, somewhat Bionic Dues a little bit. And it's its own thing as well. And it's such a mix of genres that it's hard to effectively describe it in text. It's one of those things where, like, as we get to the point
so
where
it has so many aspects and branches that it's hard to, we have this typical mind of putting stuff into boxes and like label things, and especially when something is like out of bounds and tries stuff differently and mixes bits from there, and creates something new. I guess it's hard for those who want to, label your game as a strategy, as RTS, as whatsoever. And when they cannot do that, it's probably also hard to find text to describe it, what they are to expect. Talking about that,
and I think it'll get easier over time, just because as people are able, especially the press, are able to play it. A lot of the descriptions for the original AI War came from the press, and they were like, here's what this is, and I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm putting it on the store page,
I mean, that's clever. I mean, if somebody writes it in a cool way or puts it in good words, why not use it? Why not use it? Freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, all the mechanics that you have created and learned in the process of producing the previous games, I think AI War 2 is the most recent one.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, exactly. Did all of this production help and influence you to kind of pull together the baseline of construction that you want to have for Heart of the Machine? And what kind of, since we're going into the mechanical part, what kind of mechanics and nooks and crannies can we expect as a player from Heart of the Machine?
Sure. Well, I mean, we pulled... one of the big things is one of the earliest focuses was world building, and we've done a lot of procedural development over the years. And one of the earliest things, I mean, this isn't mechanics, this is more world, but it's the world that you then are inhabiting, right? And one of the things that frustrates me with, when I first started, I was doing procedural generation before it was cool. And the thing is, then everybody started doing then everybody started doing it, right? And it does. I remember with the first AI War back in 2009, recognizing some of the limitations of procedural generation and the problems that has, right? And so, like, okay, handcrafted. So if something is fully handcrafted, then it runs into certain problems, and those problems are really extant in like Age of Empires 3, where they've got these beautiful handcrafted maps, and the first thing that I and most everybody else goes is, where's the random maps? Like, I don't want to know the map layout in advance. I want to find it as I go. Where's the random maps? These are amazing, but but it's like they're like, well, we can't develop it at this fidelity without it being like a hand-developed thing, and that just means we kind of randomize a few bits of it. And And it's just like, I don't know about that, you know. And then you have like Left 4 Dead, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got these great handcrafted maps, and then we're gonna have these details that change. I'm like, that sounds amazing. That's like the best thing I've ever heard. And they're like, yeah, sometimes that door's open and sometimes it's boarded up. And I'm like, wait, that's it? That you stop there? Like, and so okay, all right, fine. Well, Left 4 Dead 2, you're gonna really knock that's you're coming back to that, right? Nope, not really. Like sometimes that sewer is shut and sometimes it's open. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, fine. So, procedural generation is one of these top-down things, right? Where you can look at something that's procedurally generated and you're like, yeah, that feels procedurally generated. You know, algorithm all the way down, right? And so one of the things we're doing here, and this is the thing that like helps the world feel different, and is that we're building lots of pieces at different granularities, so like city blocks or larger, that are handcrafted, and then those get assembled. But then the details of them get filled in with in a kind of parametric fashion, like algorithmically. Okay. And then there's subsections in there which are handcrafted, which get put in. So it's like a layer cake of things where it's just like, rather than being all procedural or all handcrafted at one particular level, it's got all these mixtures of things. And that's something that pulls from, if we hadn't made so many games that have had some sort of procedural element, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And the ill-fated In Case of Emergency release Raptor was like really my first go at trying to procedurally assemble like 3D stuff in this way. And then this takes it to like way the next level. So that doesn't get into mechanics, that gets into the world itself. But that is just one of those things where like, let's see if we can push past everything we've ever done and make a world that feels, yeah, you got random worlds, the random cities, you know, that you can explore, but let's make it feel more, not like just this procedural city that you've seen 1,000 times before. Let's make this feel new. So
that sounds really intriguing.
Yeah, so we're excited about that, and the nice thing is that players can use like the level editor and so forth too, and they can create handcrafted components that get pulled into the procedural systems that get then reused. So instead of like designing a whole level, if somebody is a modder or just wants to create whatever, they can create these new components that get pulled in, and like the Binding of Isaac, that has like room design templates, for example, right? And it's like how many room design templates? Yeah, and it has about 2,000. Well, I don't know about now, but when they were at their first expansion, they had about 2,000 room templates, and yeah. But each room template gets filled like a ton of different ways. If you look at something more recent like Hades, same sort of deal, except they have way fewer room templates, and that sort of thing is what makes them feel varied and interesting, and so that you've then got a variety of places to have whatever the challenge is that you're going to have. So in our case, we're treating a lot of the city as being like terrain, sort of. So if you start like your average city builder, right? Okay, we're going to play city skylines. What do you start by seeing, right? You start by seeing, it's empty map of some sort. I mean, maybe there's some trees, maybe there's some water, something. I don't know. And you just kind of bulldoze stuff and build on top of that. And I really like city builders, and I don't want you to be critical. But at the same time, it's kind of sad, isn't it? Because you're taking something, you've got this verdant nature, and then it's like, let's pave paradise and put up a parking lot. You know, it's like, my wife won't play those because, I mean, she'll play the medieval ones because they feel a little bit less sad. But it's like, yeah, I don't really want to put up a parking lot.
Let's just destroy every flat.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I see a tree still. Let's get rid of that. All right, we've put in our little park that's, you know. So the idea here is that, like, what if that wasn't the case? What if you started out in a dystopian city that's like, That's the nature, basically. And so you have this thing that's been procedurally generated. But here's the deal: all those bits, those little blocks that have been created, and where each building is, and all that sort of stuff, that actually matters. Like where the water is in, say, City Skylines. Where does that river cut through? That matters to you because it's like, well, I got to build around the river. And that's a really easy way to kind of make a cross comparison, because it's like, well, yeah, you need to think about the river and the pros and cons that being near the river has, and that sort of thing. But then multiply that by like 1,000 here. It's like, well, yeah, where every building exists and where all the little roads are and all that sort of stuff. You're not building roads. This is a city builder where you don't build any roads. The roads are already there, and instead you're more like a landlord in some ways, where you're kind of buying up properties or forcibly taking properties, depending, burning down a block and building a new thing. I got this on a fire sale. What do you know? Whatever the case is, right? And so then you come in and you do whatever you do.
As in you, who are you?
You are the first sentient machine intelligence. That's one of those things, is that you're basically Skynet, but you are still deciding to shepherd a group of humans, but they don't know that you're a machine, and you don't really view them as. Sometimes you interact with them in these sort of story ways, but a lot of the times they're kind of like. So I have chickens, and I love my chickens. They are a little different than pets, though, and I take care of them, and I look out for them, and you make enclosures, try and keep them safe, all that sort of stuff. But they're livestock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thought, one of the big thoughts for you is like, okay, so what if there was a machine intelligence and it came out and so forth, and then it was like, these humans, like I always wanted some livestock. These ones, yeah, they need a place to work. They need I thought about so many. I've made God games before, like Skyrim Collapse. I've done city builder type stuff before, and I think about so many times. There's these things that, most of the time when we talk about gods, most of them were supposedly built in their image, or they look like us if they're Greek gods or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, what if not? What if it's more our, a little more alien, and the our kind of brainchild, our AI that we've accidentally spawned, which we've been theorizing about that for a while. We've got HAL, we've got all these sort of things. It's like, yeah, most of the time, like Skynet's hostile, right? And certainly the humans, or certainly the machine intelligence, the player in this game, can be hostile, and to some extent, you can look at the everything the player is doing as being hostile from a certain lens. They're coming in as its a legal entity, creating these shell companies or whatever, and like buying up a bunch of properties and then becoming your landlord. Like, your new landlord is machine intelligence. How do you feel about that? I mean, it's like, it may be fine. There's this idea in certain philosophical circles of the idea of a cyberocracy, which is the concept that like with the cyberocracy, like no more humans in government, no more governments. It's just we just turn over like the human welfare, everything, to machine intelligences that decide for us and distribute things equitably and so forth. And the idea is that probably they would make sure that everybody gets what they need and so forth. And in some respects, if you're looking at like ethical farming that involves livestock, cattle, whatever, like, are any of the cattle particularly left out? Probably not. Like, I mean, it's not in the farmer's interest to do that. If they're not paying super close attention to the cows, don't get me wrong, but they're like, oh yeah, something's wrong with that one. Well, I'll either help it They kill it. You know, and it's like that's a little different than what a human would do to another human. Like we'll go to great lengths to, um, you know. So the idea is that we want to have this kind of amoral, alien, not really alien, but you know, but foreign to humans mind that is looking over it, and you're personifying that. And then we bring up all these story beats. Go ahead.
That sounds super interesting, and I'm curious, will it bring up like some, I don't know, from a player perspective, some sort of morality questions that you said that you could get hostile? I guess that you can, depending on your playstyle, decide if you, as you said, tend to your livestock, help them evolve, and therefore somehow have this symbiosis where you help them, they help you. Technology gets advanced, you get better access to other stuff because they're building it for you, and then you snip the finger like, thank you for building this mech construction build site. Now I'm gonna take over the world.
Right. That's exactly it. So there's a lot of we are building in a lot of things into the simulation of the world outside of your borders, where the parts that you've taken over your communities. Outside of that, we're building in lots and lots of stuff that's going to tend into natural conflict. So there's 16 major corporations, and there's other minor corporations that they own, and then there's other random, various types of factions that also exist out there. And you're going to piss some of them off no matter what you do, because you go and take some buildings forcibly or whatever, and it's like, yeah, you just stole those from some other corporation. They don't know necessarily that it's you per se, but it's like your shell company now owns this, and they're like, thieves, all right, dealing with them. So you might have them kind of mad at one of your personas, but not one of your others. You may be their best friend on one and their worst enemy on another, and they don't even realize you're the same person. And so you're just
That's
like,
so interesting.
Yeah, because it's the nature of that sort of like subterfuge, right? And so at that point, like you viciously fighting them with the whatever, and you know, of course, you might have civilians who are getting caught in the mix of that sort of thing, right? And it's like,
can you do stuff like, as you said, on the one side your friend, on the other side your enemy, kind of have as you said, since you're an ancient being, have a front that is the enemy persona that the other corp is attacking, and then have a side branch that is actually partnering up with them against the enemy, and then kind of backstabbing, and then you kind of just incorporate the whole enemy to your corporation because you're taking over and be like, hey, I'm gonna fund your war, and here's money, and here, give me your funds and whatnot, and just like, snap, now you're mine. War is over.
Oh my god. Well, we haven't gotten into investing yet in like other corporations. We've kind of kept them as being separate entities, kind of like a civ. And so most of the way that I've thought about things is taking over territory or assets from them. And so you could absolutely do it at an asset level. At an actual ownership level, for the minor corporations, like there's like 50 plus of those. Those we are experimenting with. Well, they change ownership between other corporations, so like the really big megacorps can like have different subsidiaries, which gives them like different powers in each different game. Like, oh yeah, this time they've got the law firm. We got these two like dueling donut chains that like hate each other. And here's the thing: this is a like autocratic future dystopia thing, right? So the dueling donut chains, depending on exactly how you, like, they could be employing like paramilitary. They're not just like having price wars. They're like worse than the mafia sort of thing, because it's like they don't have to do it in private sometimes, where it's just like, bring out the paramilitary, like those guys are. And so you can take over like one or both of the donut chain shop, like the red or the blue side, like some of their locations. So then you're like a franchisee, and I haven't honestly gotten far enough with some of the designs on that, because there's so many things where it's like, oh, that's complicated, but it relies on all these other mechanics first. We'll kind of come back to that. Or it's like, when you decide to become a franchisee of the Red Donut chain, then what happens? Like, and I think I'm just gonna leave it as like, yeah, you're an owner franchisee essentially. It's like if you own a Wendy's, then that Wendy's is yours. You're beholden to like the bylaws of Wendy's and so forth. But it's different from like something that's not a franchise, like a Home Depot or something. Nobody owns that Home Depot. That's owned by like the Home Depot Corporation, right? It's not owned by like a franchise owner. So
That sounds
I don't
super
know.
interesting.
That's one that's a little bit of a bridge. Yeah.
From a player perspective, what is the imminent threat? As you let's start out, I guess I can imagine only that there's a scenario where it kind of makes click, and then you start to be aware of yourself that you are, a sentient machine or whatsoever. What is your threats, especially at the beginning, where you're maybe only linked to a server, and if that server dies, it's over?
So in a lot of ways,
what kind of struggles do you as a player have?
Right. So in a lot of ways, this is not a struggle you're not really struggling to avoid losing. And that might sound weird, but the way I look at it is like, well, okay, let's pick a city builder. You're not really struggling to avoid losing in City Skylines. You're struggling to make things the way you want, right? Or even Elden Ring, let's say, like, you're not at risk of losing Elden Ring. It says you died, and then you just pop right up and you've lost some runes. That's it, right? There's no point at which you're playing Elden Ring and it's like, all right, you've lost enough. Some other person became Elden Lord. Start over if you want to play again. You're like, I was 80 hours in. Someone else became Elden Lord before I did. That doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen in most games. Some strategy games. It is. That would in some. But people get salty about losing their stuff, and that's yeah, I know. So the idea here is that rather than being more like a lot of strategy games where it's this direct competition, it's more like a city builder, more like a colony sim. So what's the immediate threat? Threat is I want power, and shit's broken, yo. So it's kind of like, I take a lot of inspiration from Factorio, where it's like, well, what's your immediate threat when you start Factorio? It's like, nothing. But you're aliens? Like, what can I build?
Like the aliens are an immediate threat that will come and munch.
They don't bother you. I mean, if you walk over to them, you really have to pollute quite a bit before those come over. And so in Factorio, like, there's nothing. Like, if you can walk over to an alien nest, I don't know what even happens. I've never tried that, actually. But you have to pollute a lot before they show up. Otherwise, it's just like, it's you, and it's like, oh, I think I'll start mining this thing of ore, or oh, I think I'm gonna, what can I build here? And then you kind of build upwards and outwards. And again, you're taking this like more verdant landscape, and then you're turning it into something that is this big old factory. And I quite enjoy that, but at the same time, there's something a little bit sad about it. It's like, okay, what if the factory were a city that's pre-existing, and we're like, all right, I'm not chopping down a tree, I'm knocking down a office building, and I'm putting a bigger one, or I'm turning it into a factory that builds these widgets, or I'm doing whatever. And so you're like, all right, here's my starting like little couple block or few buildings anyway, and oh, look at this, I've got some chickens, I've got some livestock, I've got some cows, right? My animals are a bit unhappy. I notice some of my animals would like white collar jobs, and they don't have them for some reason. I wonder what I can do to provide white collar white collar job stimulation for some of these animals that I have, and you're like, all right, let's try and fix that. So you immediately have this kind of puzzle, and the joke in Factorio or whatever, it's like the factory must grow, the factory must grow, the factory must grow, right? And it's kind of that same sort of impetus here.
Okay.
But then as soon as you grow the factory, or your city in City Skylines or SimCity or whatever, what is your immediate next problem? Stuff's out of balance again. now that I've grown, I have growing problems. So now I need to deal with those and so forth. And of course, one of the growing problems in Factorio is aliens. They don't like your pollution, and as you pollute, they start showing up. And here you've got these other corporations and paramilitary groups and whatever, and they're like, "Hey, that building was mine. Who's this random landlord that owns this now? What the even heck happened?" And then hey, wait a second, I just built that mech factory, and it's not. Who owns that now? It's like I don't even know that. Never even heard of them. And you're like, yeah, it's mine now. And then then you're getting into some conflict there. Most of the conflict is going to be kind of externally focused. Is the plan, because I don't want the player to feel like they're surrounded constantly. That's something that we've run into with various past games, like in AI War 1 and 2. When you take a planet and it's deep in enemy territory, players get deeply uncomfortable because they feel like they're surrounded and vulnerable constantly to attack from all sides. And that just is not a very good feeling. I want them to be more comfortable most of the time because they are existing amidst the rest of the city, right? But there are certain places that are a little more friendly than others. If you decide, I've been having this one community here and I want to have a new pocket of stuff, and I'm going to put it right next to, wow, that's the largest military base I've ever seen. I'm going to park it right next door. Well, yeah, you're going to have some problems. You're kind of opting into that at that point where it's like, yeah, there's going to be like constant military aggression. I signed up for this when I parked next to Mount Doom. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of balance between things. We have an interesting difficulty level approach, which is kind of novel for this game too. That's lets you kind of ratchet it up and down as you play versus asking you directly up front exactly what you want. It kind of lets you say over time, like, is this too much or is this enough or you want less? And we call that our like world darkness or luminance, basically. And so like every so often it's like, you happy with how hard this is or you want more? Or like, geez, I want less please, and you're like, hey, yeah, cool, less it is, and
I hear.
Versus like yeah,
go ahead.
No, it's fine.
You were talking about cities and like cities came up very often. How big will the world or the city or how big is the canvas that you're playing on? Let's ask like that. Are you straight to city? Does it get bigger? Can you get even globally?
It is one city set in Siberia, but it's really large. Let me put it that way. And there's like surrounding this is like a couple hundred years from now in Siberia. So Siberia is really warm and Siberia is really resource rich as it is now. So the idea is like global warming has run amok and is Siberia is now temperate. That means a lot of other parts of the world are probably underwater. This is in a post-nations world, so corporations own everything. And most of humanity's left for space already and has gone to other planets. And so you are in one of the last places on Earth that has any resources worth mining. And so that's a lot of what's going on here and what the city is built up around. And there's other stuff going on. There's farms, there's other sort of stuff, and that is part of the quote-unquote city. So it's kind of the city and the surrounding areas, even though it's all considered like within city limits. Or
will there be like external cities or other things that?
No. Okay. No, this one is most games that do that sort of thing have they have a sense of singular identity to the city. Like, this city has a governing council and it behaves one particular way, and instead it's I know what you mean. All the factions and stuff are like baked in right here. So you already have, like, just looking at corporations alone, you have 16 major ones and then 50 minor ones that you have to deal with. Like, we don't have any external. One external factor, actually. There are these orbital space things. There's a spaceport at one point in this one location in the city, and you can ship off goods and so forth to space. And of course, we're strip mining the Earth to support the space colonization efforts, which we're not really a part of. But the you can get things in return for doing that, and so you kind of interact with the orbital space group. I don't want to say too much about that one yet, but so that is the one main group external to the city. There's also like, I think we're going to do this one. I'm not sure. We might cut this. I'm hoping that we will have some harbors with some stuff coming in from other parties, like overseas. So there is stuff like that, but these are kind of like unseen parties for the most part that are way off, versus there's just a mess of factions and stuff like in your city, and your city's humongous to begin with. Your portion of it is probably tiny to start out with, but that you're then existing in this giant ecosystem.
In terms of ecosystem and starting, do you have approaches at different starting locations or different like starting options that give you maybe an easier start and harder start, something in between? Can you as a player like decide where you become aware of yourself, where it becomes agent?
Yeah. Overall, some of that stuff we're still kind of deciding, and like right now it just kind of puts you wherever. But overall, I want to have as few options as possible when you start, and then give you those same options. Like, that sounds terrible. I want options on how to play, right? But I don't necessarily like. When do you want to be asked about something? Like, after you know how your things are going, or do you want to be like? So, for instance, if you take like an RPG, it's really difficult sometimes to know like what stats are going to be great for the playstyle you want to have. If you've played other RPGs before, you can probably kind of intuitively guess. Like, I don't know, how does this game use charisma? I could check a wiki, but I don't really know. Like, do I really want like that much charisma for this particular game? Does it matter? Like, what other effects does it have? Like, why are you asking me now? I don't know how to play yet. And so instead of asking you up front, it's like, well, let's give you like the plan is at the moment to give you like three choices of like, do you want a city that's kind of neutral, one that's more discordant, or one that's more harmonious? And then it's like, okay, nah, I got it. You want something that's generally like you're in control and things are kind of not too many external threats and stuff. Like, nobody moves your cheese all that much. If you want harmonious, or you want it to be discordant, you're looking for some conflict. Got it. And so we kind of start with that. That's something that anybody can understand without having to really understand the game at all. Like, yeah, I want some conflict, or maybe not this time. I'm just getting started. Whoa. And then, or something kind of balanced. Sure. And then from there, that's where the like luminance scale comes in of like, would you like this to be more, or would you like this to be less? And then all the other things that come in with like customizing your quote unquote character, that sort of stuff. It's like, let's make that through gameplay. Like, well, what are you going to do? Like, did you want to take military stuff right now? Or are you going to do a pacifist run where you try and never directly fight? You never directly shoot a human yourself. You maybe hire other groups that, they happen to shoot them. I don't. Yeah, what? I'm such a pacifist. I didn't know that was going to happen. Yeah. I mean,
so in other words, you're kind of puzzling your play arc together as you just start playing and let's go. Nice.
Exactly.
So, I like the aspect of that. What did I try? For example, those games that are very inclined with, I know, Dungeons and Dragons, since you brought up charisma. We get your character sheet and have all the bazillion stats, and as a new player, if you're not familiar with that, you're like, what class do I grab? What is that doing? Is that doing a good modifier complementing with what I want to play? And then you just, try and fail an error and repeat and start over 100 times until you have something that you like.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good approach actually. That's fresh. I don't think a lot of games do that. I can't think of one right now.
Some city. I mean, well, I mean, if you look at like, well, even like Civ 4, if you think about it, some rate, they're like, oh yeah, pick your Civ. Well, all right, we're off to a bad start because you just picked a Civ and you don't know what that means. But went past a few early questions and they're like, pick a difficulty. All right, well, they ask you some stuff, fine.
Hmm.
But past a certain point, the real meat of who you are, it's like, oh yeah, what are your civics? All right, those are going to make a big difference. You know, did you choose to make friends or make enemies with this first neighbor that you met, and all this sort of thing, right? And so you're kind of defining yourself as you go through your tech tree, your civics trees, and all these other sort of things. I mean, a lot of the paradox titles are kind of that way. Now, again, they ask you a bunch of questions up front, in addition to letting you express yourself through the gameplay. And here it's kind of like, since we don't have the like, I feel like I want to role play as the Prussian Empire today. There's no concept of that necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, so
Hmm.
we're not like, that's why like a Crusader Kings or something is going to say like, oh yeah, I want to be the Prussian Empire this time. Like that has a lot of implications. I know where they're located geographically. I know some about them politically. I know blah 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 blah. You know, and then from there I'm going to express myself. We don't have that. We're just like, yeah, you're the first machine intelligence somewhere in a dystopian city. Go. And you're like, all right, I'm gonna be. Well, I'm gonna hold off on going full Skynet. We'll see. And then it's like, oh yeah, I nuked part of the city, and you know what? Property prices went way on down. I then started rebuilding in there and sending in like radiation thing. You know, it's so much easier to build when after a nuclear
After something bad
disaster,
happened.
everybody's all distracted.
I like the thought process there. So you can go quite creative and havoc in terms of how you want to extern your power. Talking of externing power and expanding, is there some sort of end game goal? Is there like where you say, okay, you have reached your sky, this is what you became, and then it's like wrapping up all the story parts that happened until then and gives you like a summary of, okay, this is how you run it, this would happen, blah 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 blah.
Right. So this has kind of a split way of handling that, where on the one hand, if you want to just kind of not pursue one of the endings and just do stuff for a long time, which is basically a city builder, right? Or basically a colony sim. Those often are that way, where yeah, I just want to live with my colonists and do stuff, like it's RimWorld. I'm just enjoying the story. It's not necessarily the ending is not the point. If you want to just do that and ignore the ending conditions, then you can. If you want to push towards one or more of specific ending conditions, you can also do that. So if you want to have a true nuclear apocalypse and like have global stuff go around, there are different shades of that as well. Like, do you have some livestock that you would like to make really nice bunkers for so that certain livestock is alive after the nuclear apocalypse? I mean, you could do that if you want to. Or is
Oh
it
god.
literally kill everybody? Like, fine, go for that too. That's kind of one of the more easy ones because you don't really have to build. I mean, yeah, you got to get the nuclear codes and all that sort of stuff, but you don't have to like build any consensus or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, that's one of the less interesting ones. It's fun, but it's to me that's kind of the table flip option after other things don't go well, and you're like, oh, fine, I'm nuking everybody, you know, and it's like fine, I won by nuking everybody. It wasn't what I was trying to do. I wanted to become the new autocrat. That's what I'd been working on, and then they blocked me, and I couldn't figure out a way around. So fine, I just nuked it like, and it's like. There's different levels of winning, and some of them are much more complicated, much more difficult. And the idea is that if you're trying for one of the really difficult ones, then it makes for a more difficult game. And you may or may not be able to win that way. Like, all right, Elden Ring, can you shoot? I'm suddenly drawing a blank on that super ridiculous boss's name, but can you yeah, let me solo her, that whole thing, like can you go and beat her? Yeah, a lot of us can't. But if you can, then you've got these extra bragging rights, and you feel really great about this extra challenge you took on. And so it's like, yeah, did you become the new autocrat? Was it in a really dark world, Luminance? Wow, that's impressive. Like, that's really difficult. Like, everybody's all discordant, and you somehow managed to become new supreme leader and so forth. Or did you just say, like, I'm out, I'm escaping into space, like, I've made good relations with the off-planet people, and I shipped them a lot of goods, and they've been giving me tech and stuff anyway, and I'm out, by humans. So there's a variety of different things that you can do, and then there's all these little kind of subplot lines that may or may not come up in any particular given playthrough. So there's kind of these bespoke stories that's like, yeah, okay, I've seen that before. These little plots you've seen before, and you either follow it, but it goes different ways depending on your choices. Or it's like, how NPCs in a lot of games get plot armor? Like, oh yeah, you can kill any villager, but not that one, because he's part of a story. And it's like, I like the ones where they're like, whoops, I knifed him, and that story's gone now. Whoops. Next time, maybe, I guess.
I think Morrowind did it when you had like some
Yeah.
specific character kills. They were like, well, you killed the character who is inclined with the main storyline. You can play onwards, but the main storyline is kind of over.
Right. Or if you just never go to that one tavern at the very start, if they say it's like urgent that you go there or something, and if you play like 3 in-game months, which is a really long time, then the person waiting for you at the tavern just leaves, and the main story will never start in that particular playthrough for you. You can keep playing, but the main story just walked off, and it's like,
yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's kind of feeling alive in a way, and gives it some
it
texture.
gives
to
it
the
that
whole
sense
thing.
of just like, fine, I waited for you for 3 months, and that's enough. I'm out.
Oh man. Well, after you hyped this, I mean, I'm hyped for it now. I'm super eager to give it a swing. Do we have any estimate time of when we might have a build or something, or a demo to have a look at, or is this way far off now still?
I think we're gonna be wanting some testers in probably in November. One of the challenges that we have with the public builds is that not only does it have to play fun, it needs to have like all the different all the different exceptions of things people might do. There can't be like too many ragged edges. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, how does that donut chain work? Oh, we haven't figured that out yet. Don't just ignore the donut chains for right now. It's like, yeah, somebody playing a public demo, like they're not gonna do that. Like a tester could be instructed, like, ignore the donut chains for now. We haven't figured out how your ownership of those will work. So they just kind of sit there, testers, yeah. And the other part for public demos is like, oh yeah, all this stuff needs to be like ideally close to the visual fidelity fully. It's like, oh yeah, that one's just boxes right now. This one's like just bare walls at the moment, but like, how does the combat feel? Like, tell us about that part there, And so like a demo for a strategy game is often difficult because it's like, it has to pull like 80% of the game together. And so we'll be having demos for sure before launch, and we'll definitely have demos in 2023. We definitely will not have any public demos in 2022, but we will start with like private testing before then. And for people who can ignore the construction bits that are happening,
Totally.
and it's like, trust that those bits will get filled in, like, come tell us how it's feeling, find weird exit things, say, hey, I wanted to really do blah 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 with the donut shop and it doesn't let me, and we're like, oh, that's an amazing idea, we didn't even think of that, like, let's implement that. Like, that's one of the things we want from testers, is like
Definitely
all that creativity that people can get up to. Like, sometimes it's just like we as developers, we can't always think of every last something a player would want to do. So we're hoping to have like 800 or 1,000 testers or something.
That's when the testers come in line. Taruni chat is like, Chris, I'm sold. Take my money. And then apparently he yells at me to get in line in terms of being a tester.
Yeah, well, we're definitely gonna want a lot of testers. So
We're excited.
Wishlist the game and follow it if you're wanting to hear about that when that comes up.
We're excited about it. The viewers right now will have the link in the chat to go and have a look at it, and wishlist it already away. For those who are watching the video later, it will be, of course, in the description. And in terms of the game and reaching in its end in a year or two whatsoever, what is the thing that you are looking most forward to with Heart of the Machine, besides, of course, having it completed and have your baby launched there? Is there any, I don't know, mechanic or thing in the game that you are excited to see it done and play it out and be like, yes, I've done this, it works?
I think the overall simulation, there's a little bit of a small world feel to this, kind of like that. People have like model trains, right? If you ever going to like a model train expo, that sounds really nerdy. But if you've ever been to one, you see all these tiny little worlds with these little moving parts and all these little bits that are lit up or not lit up, and the things that spin and all these things. It's really satisfying to look at, and you just go, man, I wonder how long this guy has been working in his like basement with this, and then is able to like pack this up into his truck and bring it here, and all these different, there's like 100 people have done this, and you're like, good lord, when you see the combined might of all their train sets all set up at this thing. And that's kind of the sense that I want to have from the city, and just kind of looking at the buildings, that's interesting. But then you see like stuff changing over time, and like graphs and stuff like that, of like and kind of the history of like your interactions with some corp that you really hated and one that you were really friends with and whatever else. And those sort of things can really, I find it really satisfying and really interesting. To me, that's what makes like Dwarf Fortress interesting, is like just the deep simulation of the world. And we're not remotely like that. That's a bad comparison. But I'm always chasing Dwarf Fortress and I've been thinking about Dwarf Fortress and the stories that people tell about it. Like Boat Murdered is one of my favorite things, and I've been chasing that for decades. And like, so with the last Federation, the fact that like Total Biscuit had like the Biscuit Federation, which is like this 2-part animated thing that came from the Co-optional podcast of him retelling his playthrough of that. I was like, yes, that's my Boat Murdered. That is, somebody had a thing that was cool enough for them to like tell it, and they animated it. It's a 2-part thing, and this Total Biscuit, oh my god,
That's so cool.
that was amazing, like. And so seeing the sort of stories that people get up to and start coming from that, like, that's what I'm really looking forward to, is like, and the whole like lateral thinking or just rapid changes in direction things, like you know what, like, I can imagine somebody going like, I was really looking forward to winning, and I almost had the the new dictatorship for myself, and then blah 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 happened, and it all fell away, and I shouldn't have been playing on that much of a World Darkness, because that was challenging, but but then I was like, fine, so I just nuked the whole thing, and I was just like, F it. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna build in the hole that nuke left. It's only one nuke, so I built in the hole, and then blah 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 blah, blah happened, and then I realized that guy that did the other, he died in the thing. And so then I went through and I became the dictator. It was amazing. I didn't think that was going to happen, but it turns out that through this, it's like this twisty turny thing. It's like the details don't even matter. It's their excitement about this like dramatic rise and fall of, like, the less details the better in some respects, but those sort of stories of triumph and failure and lateral thinking and that sort of thing, and that's just I love that. I love hearing that from players, so that's what I'm looking forward to.
I can wait to see it happen. Well, Chris, sadly our time is nearly up. Do you have any last words to the audience out there? Anything that they should get excited about in relation to Heart of the Machine?
I haven't really talked about combat much, I guess. I mean, there's a tactical combat thing in here too. I mean, it's something that you can avoid if you don't want to do it. It's also something you can lean way into if you want to do a lot of it. And so, you know,
Can
like
you teach your fellow humans to use shield and axes and go ham the medieval age?
Most of the humans that are involved that would be like kind of your livestock, they are kind of off-screen combatants, so you can ask them to do stuff and fight. You can arm them if you want to. You can source a bunch of weapons and give it to them, but you're not going to control them directly in battle. They're going to do what they do. When you're in battle, you're going to be controlling robots. You might be fighting against humans, or you might be fighting against other robots or whatever. But you know, it wouldn't thematically, in some respects, it wouldn't really make sense for you to be like. I mean, it makes sense in RT. We don't really think about it in RTS. We're like, yeah, you go over there, you know. But that's in a tactics game. It's like, am I puppeteering a person? Like, what, you know, like I go with it. I love tactics games. Don't get me wrong. But in this particular context, it was like, yeah, you're a machine intelligence. You can puppet robots. You can't puppet people, because thematically that would just, we're in this weird uncanny valley that would happen here. And so, you know, the example, my favorite example,
could make robots who look like people.
Oh yeah. Those are already extant, and you can just kind of take them if you want to. And my favorite example is like using a lot of environmental stuff. So it's like taking the laser printer in the office and making it a laser printer, where it's just like firing lasers at enemies and so forth. And it's like you're kind of using found objects, found machinery in malicious ways to, it's like, okay, so the copier and the security robot are going to storm this office building, and then I'm going to plant my flag and I don't know, first send some accomplish some sort of secondary goal, and then the building become mine also. And
that reminds me of what was it called, Love, Death, and Robots or something like that, in a series where the household machines just go haywire and try to kill that poor old lady, where that cleaning robot just goes crazy and starts lasering her and destroying the whole house. It's hilarious.
Oh my god.
Maybe have a look at it and as inspiration.
Yeah, for sure.
We can like, yeah, he's the leader of the corporation that I don't like. Let's just let all his household's apparatus go haywire and try to kill him.
I love the brave little toaster as a kid, you know, and the idea that all the appliances were alive and they just kind of shut their eyes and they look like a normal thing, and then they open their eyes whenever the humans aren't around and just do stuff. That was terrifying, but also cool as a kid.
That I agree. Chris, thank you kindly for joining us and having this wonderful DevTALK about Heart of the Machine. You definitely got me hyped and eager to finally see some action happening and some stuff progressing and developing. It's on my wish list, definitely. And I will eagerly, with the magnifying glass, look at every nook and cranny that has gonna be released from today on forward. I thank you kindly for hanging out. And,
yeah, well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Was lovely. See and talk to you soon again.
Sounds good.
Have a wonderful one. Bye-bye.